Hello everyone, today we will examine two serial killer doctors who took the lives of innocent people. 1. William Palmer. William Palmer, also known as the Prince of Poisoners, was an English doctor found guilty of murder in one of the most notorious cases of the 19th century. William was born in Rugeley, Staffordshire, and was the sixth of 8 siblings. His father, Joseph Palmer, worked as a sawyer and died when William was only 12 years old. Following his father's death, William's mother, Sarah, received an inheritance of £70,000, which would later have a significant impact on his life. As a teenager, William apprenticed at a chemist in Liverpool, but was let go after 3 months due to theft allegations. He then moved to London to study medicine, qualifying as a physician in August 1846. After completing his studies, William returned to Staffordshire, where he met plumber and glazier George Abley at the Lamb and Flag pub in Little Haywood. Following a drinking challenge, George was taken home an hour later and died in bed that night. Although nothing was ever substantiated, locals noted William's apparent interest in George's attractive wife. On October 7, 1847, William married Anne Thornton, also known as Brooks, at St. Nicholas Church in Abbots Bromley. Anne's mother had inherited a substantial fortune of £8,000 after Colonel Brooks's suicide in 1834, and was known to have lent money to William. Tragically, Anne's mother passed away just 2 weeks after moving in with William, with her death attributed to apoplexy. William's fascination with horse racing deepened, leading him to borrow £600 from Leonard Bladen, whom he had met at the races. Leonard died in excruciating pain at William's home on May 10, 1850, with his death certificate noting William as present at the death. The cause was listed as injury of the hip joint for 5 or 6 months, abscess in the pelvis. Despite having recently won a significant sum at the races, Leonard had little money on him at the time, and his betting books were missing. This incident marked the beginning of a series of suspicious deaths surrounding William Palmer. His financial difficulties escalated after his marriage to Anne. The couple had 5 children, but tragically only their first son, William, survived to adulthood. The others succumbed to convulsions in infancy, and their deaths were not initially regarded as suspicious. As Palmer's debts accumulated, he started taking out life insurance policies on his loved ones, including Anne. When she died of cholera in 1854, he received a payout of £13,000 from the insurance company. However, his financial troubles persisted, prompting him to seek a substantial £84,000 insurance policy on his brother Walter. Walter's struggle with alcoholism ultimately led to his death, but the insurance company declined to pay out on the policy. They dispatched inspectors to investigate and discovered that Palmer had also attempted to secure a life insurance policy on a farmer he employed. As a result, the company refused to settle his brother's death claim and suggested a more thorough investigation. As his life unraveled, Palmer became involved in an affair with his housemaid, Eliza Tharm, who became pregnant with his illegitimate child. With his financial issues escalating, he started to plot the murder of his former friend, John Parsons. Cook was a wealthy young man who inherited a fortune of £12,000. He enjoyed the excitement of gambling and was friends with William Palmer, another gambler. The two attended the Shrewsbury Handicap Stakes in November 1855, where Cook won £3,000 by betting on Polestar, while Palmer suffered significant losses betting on the Chicken. After the race, they celebrated at a local pub, the Raven. However, Cook soon became ill, claiming that his gin had burned his throat. Palmer caused a scene, insisting that there was nothing wrong with Cook's drink. Despite this, Cook became violently ill, suspecting that Palmer had poisoned him. Cook returned to Rugeley and checked into a room at the Talbot Arms, where he met Palmer once again. Palmer took it upon himself to look after Cook, and Cook's solicitor sent over a bottle of gin. After a chambermaid took a sip of the gin and became ill, Cook's vomiting worsened. Palmer began collecting Cook's bets, totaling £1,200. He then visited Dr. Salt's office and purchased 3 grains of strychnine, which he mixed into 2 pills and gave to Cook. On November 21st, Cook died in agony, screaming that he was suffocating. Cook's stepfather came to represent the family, and Palmer told him that Cook had lost his betting books, which were irrelevant since all bets were voided upon the gambler's death. Palmer obtained a death certificate that cited the cause of death as apoplexy. A post-mortem examination was conducted under the supervision of Dr. Harlan, medical student Charles Devonshire, and assistant Charles Newton. During the examination, Palmer interfered by taking the stomach contents in a jar for safekeeping. The jars were sent to Alfred Swain Taylor, who noted that the samples were of poor quality. Palmer also wrote directly to the coroner, requesting that the cause of death be classified as natural, enclosing a 10-pound note. Although Taylor found no evidence of poison, he remained convinced that Cook had been poisoned. The jury at the inquest ultimately concluded that Cook had been poisoned by Palmer. Palmer was detained at Stafford Jail after a creditor raised suspicions that he had forged his mother's signature. He threatened to go on a hunger strike, but relented when informed he would be force-fed. An Act of Parliament was enacted to move his trial to the Old Bailey in London, as it was believed that finding an impartial jury in Staffordshire would be impossible due to local newspapers publishing extensive accounts of the case and the deaths of Palmer's children. However, some people speculate that the trial's relocation was politically motivated to ensure a guilty verdict. The Home Secretary ordered the exhumation and re-examination of the bodies of Walter and Anne. Antimony was found in Anne's organs, but Walter's body was too decomposed for examination. Palmer's defense was led by Mr. Sergeant William Shee, who drew criticism from the judge for stating that he personally believed Palmer was innocent. In contrast, the prosecution team was vigorous, effectively undermining the testimony of defense witness Jeremiah Smith. Circumstantial evidence emerged, including eyewitness accounts of Palmer purchasing strychnine and chemists admitting they sold him the poison without properly recording the transaction as required by law. During the trial, Palmer's financial situation was thoroughly examined. Thomas Pratt, a moneylender, testified that he had lent money to Palmer at an exorbitant interest rate of 60%. Furthermore, the bank manager confirmed that Palmer had only £9 in his bank account. The cause of Cook's death was fiercely contested, with medical experts presenting conflicting testimonies. Prosecution witnesses, including Alfred Swain Taylor, determined the cause of death to be tetanus due to strychnine. In contrast, the defense called upon 15 medical witnesses who argued that the poison could not have caused the death, as it would have been detectable in the stomach. After deliberating for just over an hour, the jury found Palmer guilty. Lord Campbell sentenced him to death, which Palmer accepted without any visible reaction. George Smith conducted the public hanging of William Palmer on June 14, 1856, at Stafford Prison, before a crowd of approximately 30,000 spectators. 2. Joseph Michael Swango. Joseph Michael Swango, born October 21, 1954, in Tacoma, Washington, was a physician and American serial killer who was convicted of 4 murders, but is believed to have been involved in as many as 60 fatal poisonings of his patients and colleagues. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, which he is serving at ADX Florence. Swango grew up in Quincy, Illinois, and graduated as valedictorian from Quincy Catholic Boys High School in 1972. He played the clarinet and was a member of the school's band. Although he attended a Catholic institution, he was raised in the Presbyterian faith. He served in the Marine Corps and received an honorable discharge in 1980. Following his military service, he attended Quincy College, now Quincy University, and later enrolled at Southern Illinois University School of Medicine. Swango's issues first came to light during his time at SIU. Despite being an exceptional student, graduating summa cum laude from Quincy College and winning the American Chemical Society Award, he was perceived as lazy, choosing to work as an ambulance attendant instead of focusing on his studies. Even then, he exhibited an unsettling interest in dying patients. While it went largely unnoticed at the time, several patients he was assigned to check on experienced life-threatening emergencies, with at least 5 ultimately dying. His lack of commitment to his studies caught up with him just a month before graduation, when he was discovered faking checkups during his obstetrics and gynecology rotation. Fellow students had suspected him of this behavior as early as his second year. He narrowly avoided dismissal when one committee member voted in his favor. At that time, a unanimous decision was needed to expel a student. Nevertheless, serious doubts about his abilities persisted. Eventually, the school allowed him to graduate a year after his classmates, contingent on his repeating the OB/GYN rotation and completing additional assignments in other specialties. Despite receiving a very negative evaluation in his dean's letter from SIU, Swango secured a surgical internship at Ohio State University Medical Center in 1983, which was followed by a residency in neurosurgery. While working in the Rhodes Hall wing, nurses began to notice that seemingly healthy patients were dying mysteriously and with alarming frequency, and Swango was the floor intern each time. One nurse witnessed him injecting a medicine into a patient who subsequently became seriously ill. The nurses raised their concerns with the administration, but were met with accusations of paranoia. In 1984, a brief investigation cleared Swango of wrongdoing. However, his lackluster performance meant he was not offered a residency after his internship ended in June. In July 1984, Swango returned to Quincy and started working as an emergency medical technician with the Adams County Ambulance Corps, despite having been fired from another ambulance service for making a heart patient drive themselves to the hospital. Soon, several paramedics began to notice that whenever Swango made coffee or brought in food, many of them would fall violently ill for no apparent reason. In October of that year, the Quincy Police Department arrested Swango after discovering arsenic and other poisons in his possession. On August 23, 1985, Swango was convicted of aggravated battery for poisoning his co-workers and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. His conviction sparked criticism at Ohio State, with law school dean James Meeks issuing a harsh review that concluded the hospital should have contacted the police and highlighted several significant failures in the initial investigation of Swango. Prosecutors in Franklin County, Ohio also considered charging him with murder and attempted murder, but ultimately decided against it due to a lack of physical evidence. After being released from prison in 1989, Swango worked as a counselor at the State Career Development Center in Newport News, Virginia, but was forced out after being caught making a scrapbook of disasters during work hours. He then took a job as a laboratory technician at Ateco, now Vanguard Energy, a division of CIT Logistics, in Newport News. While there, several employees sought medical help for persistent stomach pains. Around this time, he met Kristen Kinney, a nurse at Riverside Hospital, and the two fell in love, planning to marry once they were settled. Swango worked there until 1991, when he resigned to pursue a position as a doctor. Following his resignation, the FBI questioned employees on several occasions. In 1991, Swango legally changed his name to Daniel J. Adams and attempted to apply for a residency program at Ohio Valley Medical Center in Wheeling, West Virginia. By July 1992, he started working at Sanford USD Medical Center in Sioux Falls. In both instances, he forged several legal documents to reinvent himself as a physician and respected member of the community. He fabricated a fact sheet from the Illinois Department of Corrections that misrepresented his criminal history, claiming he had been convicted of a misdemeanor for a fistfight with a coworker and had received 6 months in prison rather than the 5 years he actually served for felony poisoning. This was a critical omission, as most states do not grant medical licenses to individuals with felony convictions, viewing them as evidence of unprofessional conduct. He also created a fake restoration of civil rights letter from Virginia Governor Gerald L. Baliles, falsely asserting that Baliles had restored Swango's right to vote and serve on a jury based on reports from friends and colleagues that he had committed no further crimes after his misdemeanor and was leading an exemplary lifestyle. Swango built a strong reputation at Sanford, but in October he made the mistake of trying to join the American Medical Association, AMA. The AMA conducted a more thorough background check than the medical center and uncovered his poisoning conviction. That Thanksgiving Day, the Discovery Channel aired an episode of Justice Files featuring a segment on Swango. Following the AMA report and concerns from anxious colleagues, Sanford terminated Swango's employment. Shortly after, Kinney returned to Virginia, suffering from severe migraines, which disappeared after she left him. The AMA temporarily lost track of Swango, who then managed to secure a position in the psychiatric residency program at the State University of New York at Stony Brook School of Medicine. His first rotation was in the internal medicine department at the VA Medical Center in Northport, New York, where once again patients began dying under mysterious circumstances. 4 months later, Kinney tragically committed suicide. Her mother, Sharon Cooper, was horrified to learn that someone with Swango's background could practice medicine. She contacted a friend of Kinney's, who was a nurse at Sanford, and this nurse informed Sanford's dean, Robert Talley, about Swango's current situation. Talley then called Stony Brook's dean, Jordan Cohen. Under intense questioning from Alan Miller, the head of Stony Brook's psychiatry department, Swango confessed to lying about his poisoning conviction in Illinois and was immediately fired. The public backlash led to the resignations of both Cohen and Miller before the year's end. Before resigning, Cohen, having learned from previous mistakes of other medical facilities, sent a warning about Swango to all 125 medical schools and 1,000 teaching hospitals nationwide, effectively blacklisting him from medical residencies in the United States. Since the latest incident occurred at a VA facility, federal authorities became involved. Swango vanished from the public eye until mid-1994, when the FBI discovered he was living in Atlanta and working as a chemist at a computer equipment company's wastewater facility. Soon after the FBI alerted the company, Swango was fired for providing false information on his job application. The FBI then obtained a warrant charging him with using fraudulent credentials to gain access to a VA hospital. By that time, Swango had already fled the country. In November 1994, he traveled to Zimbabwe and secured a position at Manene Hospital using forged documents. Once again, patients began to die mysteriously under his care. However, it took a year for the poisonings to be linked back to him, leading to his arrest in Zimbabwe. He was charged with poisoning and hired prominent attorney David Coulthard, but managed to escape before his trial date, eventually hiding in Zambia. In March 1997, a year and a half later, he applied for a job at the Royal Hospital in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, using a fraudulent resume. During this time, Virginia OIG criminal investigator Tom Valeri consulted with Dr. Charlene Thompson, a forensic psychiatrist, to assist in the case. With her extensive clinical expertise, she reviewed documents and evidence to create a psychological profile of Dr. Swango and provide insights into his horrific crimes. Valeri was contacted by the FBI to discuss detaining Swango, and he reached out to DEA Basic Agent Richard Thompson, who was stationed at the Manhattan DEA office. Their conversations centered on Swango's false statements on his government application to work at the Department of Veterans Affairs, where he had prescribed narcotics. This, along with other evidence, was sufficient for Immigration and Naturalization Service agents to arrest Swango in June 1997 while he was transiting through Chicago O'Hare International Airport on his way to Saudi Arabia. Confronted with strong evidence of his fraudulent actions and the likelihood of an extensive investigation into his activities in Zimbabwe, Swango pleaded guilty to government fraud in March 1998. In July 1998, he received a sentence of 3.5 years in prison. The sentencing judge prohibited him from preparing or serving food or being involved in the preparation or distribution of drugs. During this time, the government compiled a comprehensive dossier of Swango's crimes. As part of the investigation, prosecutors exhumed the bodies of 3 of his patients and discovered toxic chemicals in them. They also found evidence that he had paralyzed Baron Harris, another patient, with an injection. Harris later fell into a coma and died. Furthermore, prosecutors uncovered that Swango had lied about the death of Cynthia Ann McGee, a patient he had attended while interning at OSU. Although Swango claimed she had died of heart failure, he had actually killed her with a potassium injection that stopped her heart. On July 11, 2000, less than a week before he was set to be released from prison for the fraud charge, federal prosecutors in Long Island filed a criminal complaint against Swango, charging him with 3 counts of murder, 1 count of assault, and 1 count each of false statements, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Concurrently, Zimbabwean authorities charged him with poisoning 7 patients, 5 of whom died. Swango was formally indicted on July 17th and pleaded not guilty. However, on September 6th, he changed his plea to guilty on murder and fraud charges before Judge Jacob Mishler. Had he not done so, he faced the death penalty and potential extradition to Zimbabwe. During his sentencing hearing, prosecutors read disturbing excerpts from Swango's notebook, detailing the pleasure he derived from his crimes. Mishler sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms, and he is currently incarcerated at ADX Florence.